Hi, David.
Hi, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Let me introduce us. I'm Robert Wright of Blogging Heads TV. You're David Roberts, famous blogger at Grist. Kind of green, kind of crunchy green blog. You're out in Seattle in crunchy green territory.
Yep.
And
Got my
one
crunchy green
thing,
wall behind
you
me.
got a green wall. What does it say on the sign on your green wall?
Blah,
Blah blah.
blah,
Oh yeah,
blah.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. That's relevant to what we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about largely is this thing you wrote. This is the printout. This piece in Outside Magazine, and the online version at last check had gotten like 15,000 Facebook likes. So you must have struck a chord. And it's about your year of living mindfully. Let me read what they say by way of setting the article up. Outside Magazine says, a star political blogger for Grist.org, David Roberts, spent so much time posting and tweeting and staring at screens that he almost went nuts. Is it accurate so far?
That might be slightly hyperbolic,
But
but
within the bounds of acceptable
yeah, close
journalistic
enough.
lying. So he pulled the plug for a year, restarting his relationship with technology and actively seeking health, balance, and adventure in the real world. What he learned just might save you from a meltdown. Now, in my case, it's too late, David. But we have people out there who have not yet had their meltdowns, and so I think we should cut to the chase.
Sure.
First of all, tell us how bad had it gotten?
Well, it's like the frog boiling in water thing. It gets sort of kind of gets steadily worse behind your back while you're not looking. And I had been at it for 10 years, so I had been sort of the heat had been turning up for 10 years. And by the time I decided to take a break, I never actually sat down and added up all the hours until I was on my break and I was writing that piece and I was sort of trying to tally up. But it was something like 12 to 13 hours a day looking at some kind of screen
Mm-hmm.
or other. Because as you well know, blogging is a job that never ends or has any pause, or there's no such thing as being really not working ever.
Yeah.
You're always kind of working or thinking about working or researching or reading. And even when I wasn't doing work, all my recreational activities had also migrated online. So I watched movies online and I read, all my reading was online. I mean, everything
Mm-hmm.
was online. So I was hooked up to the screen machine almost every second of the day that I wasn't with my family.
Yeah, and the part of your piece that convinced me that you really had crossed the line and it was time for somebody to stage an intervention was when you said that you were tweeting while peeing. Now, it's like one thing if you're sitting down on the toilet,
Right.
but this is where I draw the line personally.
Yeah, it's only like 30 seconds, right? But
Right. I mean,
at
could we
that
not
point, it had
spare 30
become even
seconds?
30 seconds of no input,
But Jimi Hendrix used to bring his guitar into the bathroom apparently and play it. So,
I think that's a good line. That's a good line for people to draw at the bathroom door.
But the line that got your attention is on the sign behind your head. Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure, sure. It was just a funny dinner conversation. Me, my wife, and my two kids, boys, were at dinner and we were talking about what they want to be when they grow up and they're speculating. And it occurred to me, I was like, do you know what I do? Do you know what I do for a living? And Huck, my younger one, said, well, all you do is sit on your computer and say, blah, 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 Congress, blah, 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 Mitt Romney. And I was like, haha, wait, that's exactly right. That is all I do. And then we all had a big laugh about it, and they bought me this sign you see behind my head that says blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
to remind me. And, like from Huck's point of view, I sort of said this in the piece, but from my point of view, my time on computers and screens was this sort of dazzling array of different activities and constant variety. There's so many different things you're doing often at once.
Mm-hmm.
But from his point of view, it was just me hunched over my screen, not in the world with him, and it's just, to him, that's all I did.
But hunched over intensely, right? You're pretty intensely engaged in your issues. So when I read that, I imagined the blah 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 Mitt Romney being like an expletive or something, and maybe it wasn't. But did he was he partly talking about like how irate you got? Or
Yes, this was actually right around the time of the Obama-Romney debates
mm-hmm.
in the election, and we watched those all together. And much like when I'm driving, when I'm watching political debates, I lose my cool a little bit. So yeah, and you know, part of the intensity is just always wanting to be in it. You know, as a journalist, especially on Twitter and social media, you start getting the impression that every second you're not in there, important things are happening and you're
right.
being excluded and you're missing them.
As the New Yorker cartoon has it, not now, honey. Somebody's wrong on the internet.
Yes, that was
something like
my
that.
life.
Yeah. So you took radical measures, and I remember when you signed off from your blog a little more than a year ago. So what exactly did you do?
Well, you know, I was just out in the backyard one evening talking with my wife, and you know, I was lamenting, as I often did at the time, about some other things I would like to do or try, and how sort of poor my physical health had gotten. I just felt kind of stiff and out of shape, and you know, and I was talking about a book that I might want to write, you know, a fictional book. And just stuff like that. And I was just saying, you know, my work at this point leaves no, I don't know how people work and do other things too, because my work leaves no seconds of my day free. There's no room for anything else in my life but work and the few hours I get with you guys in the evening. That's it. And, you know, I was just sort of speculating, like, wouldn't it be nice if I could just take a whole year and just put that aside and do all these other things or experience all these other things that I've been missing. And she said, well, why don't you just do that? We could probably swing that if we tightened our belt or whatever. And
good wife you got there. Good wife you got there.
Yeah, exactly. I had never seriously considered it and wasn't even seriously talking about it. But when she said that, I was like, oh, so it could be a real thing. And then, like, once that got in my head, I couldn't let it go. So I just arranged with my boss at work. The people at Grist are great and very flexible, and you know, we have a long relationship. So I told them I wanted some time off, and they said sure. You know, that they weren't going to pay me while I was gone, but they were happy to basically hold my job in place for when I got back. So I took a whole year just to screw about. And I didn't really, honestly, like, I know it seems naive in retrospect now, but when I decided to do it and when I wrote about doing it on the blog, I didn't really expect, I don't know what I expected. I didn't expect much of anything. I figured my tiny band of loyal readers would, you know, care and no one else would. But I wrote this blog post saying I'm going to take a year off. I'm fried. I need time to, like, reacquaint myself with the real world. And it was extraordinary, the feedback it got, the comments, the people were calling me. It's one of those blog posts that sort of escapes your little bubble and gets out in the real world. And it's amazing how it bounced around. And if you go read the comments under the post, you know, as someone who spends a lot of time on the internet, it was hundreds of comments, and they were almost all positive and supportive, which never happens on the internet about anything. You know, it's extraordinary. And everyone was saying the same thing, which is, oh, I know exactly what you mean. I have feeling the exact same thing. And not like I'm jealous you get to do this, or I'm angry you get to do it and I don't, but really, like, happy. Like, I'm so glad someone's doing this. I'm so glad you're out there. I think this is great and wonderful for you. It was amazing. Mm. So yeah, that's when I sort of realized that I had hit a kind of nerve. You know, it was a very widespread sense, a very widespread feeling, I think. And that's why the outside guys called me as they read that post.
Yeah, I think people are still grappling with how exactly to integrate this whole, like, new world into our lives. So how far off the grid. You didn't go totally off the grid. You didn't like move to the Unabomber shack or anything, right? You didn't. So
Yeah.
what were the lines you drew?
Sure. It was never my intent. I mean, the whole off the internet aspect of it was the part that fascinated outside editors and is sort of fascinating to all these media outlets I've talked to since. But to me, and for my life, that was only one aspect of it. And more, it was putting aside work that was the bigger deal than putting aside the internet. It just so happened that the two were kind of coextensive for me. So, I still use the internet I still use Google Maps, and, I shopped online. I didn't try to become, Amish or anything. I didn't really, that just seems like kind of performance art to me. It seems like kind of a stunt, and I had no real interest in, like David, who's a magician, David Blaine, like locking myself in a box for a year. Or, he's the guy who does all this.
That would have been going too far.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, but my rules were no work, which meant no work-related email, no reading about climate change or energy or all these things that I'd spent so much time on, detaching from the news cycle, and most of all, I uninstalled Twitter and Facebook and all social media. My one hard and fast rule is that I was going to go quiet. I just wasn't going to contribute. I wasn't going to talk on Twitter or Facebook. I wasn't going to like or link or forward anything. I wasn't going to, you know what I mean? Like, I was going to disappear as a persona from the internet. That was the real thing. Just detach from it. I didn't, and most of those rules I was able to follow pretty well. I didn't, for as much as I was involved in social media and the news cycle and the whole journalist, news cycles aren't even 24 hours anymore. They're like an hour long now. For all I had been involved in that, it was pretty easy to cut it off. I didn't really miss it. I mean, I cut it off sharply, and that was it for a year.
Did it start feeling kind of good? I mean, I'm sure it took some adjustment, but were there several days or weeks into it where you were like, wow, this is just like lying on the beach?
Well, yeah. What was great is, especially in those first few weeks, is my body had become so accustomed to that kind of regular minute by minute sort of little bursts, and I would get these little kind of surges of anxiety or adrenaline, like I'm supposed to be doing something, because I was always supposed to be doing something, and then I would just think, oh, I really have nothing to do, and every time that happened, it was satisfying. Like I should, that anxiety would come back, and then I could consciously release it because it wasn't attached to anything. It's amazing how long those surges of adrenaline and anxiety lasted, though, even absent any reason for them or stimulus creating them. I had internalized that cycle so deeply that it took quite a few weeks or months really to completely let it go.
And then after that, was there a period of, hey, this is wonderful? I mean, kind of right away?
Yeah, it was wonderful, and it wasn't anything in particular that I did. Like, I warned the outside editors early on. I was like, I'm not going to go climb Everest and, learn how to do woodwork or whatever. Like, it's just not like one of those kind of things. I'm just going to chill out. It's going to be, from the outside, it's probably going to look pretty boring. And that's mostly what I did, is just chill out. And like my favorite thing to do in the afternoons was just sit and look out the front window and read a novel. I mean, the thing we never get to experience in our modern world, and especially in white collar work or information work or whatever you want to call it, is we never get to experience not having anything to do. Even when we're choosing not to do something, even when we're choosing to take a break or be away from it, it's still there. It's always there. It's never not there. And that's what the devices and the computers and everything exacerbate that. They make it right there, present to you all the time. So even when you're not paying attention to it, it's kind of a willed, you're willing yourself not to pay attention to it. It's still hovering. So experiencing literally having nothing to do was crazy. Like, I had not experienced that for, decades. And it was delightful. Yeah. I mean, it was genuinely enjoyable just to sit there and think about how I had nothing to do.
Yeah.
I could spend hours doing it.
Now, a big theme in your piece is mindfulness. That means different things to different people. Some people think of mindfulness meditation. And in fact, the closest thing to what you did that I've done is I've gone on these 1-week silent meditation retreats where you're totally, totally off the grid. You don't even speak. You just meditate all day.
Yeah.
And that can be transformative.
That's pretty hardcore.
At least for the time being, it doesn't always last, but it can be pretty amazing. You didn't do meditation, but you did get into yoga. And
Right.
Can you talk about yoga and mindfulness? Because the only time I tried yoga once, and it was just somebody telling me to do stretches, and like I didn't, and then I left, and that was it. But so when I think mindfulness training, I think meditation. But for you, yoga, tell us how yoga can be more than just somebody telling you to do stretches.
Sure. Well, all I think mindfulness is when it's kind of stripped of the, and this is how I put it in the piece too, when it's stripped of kind of all the cultural cruft that's attached to it with the, with the incense and the sitar music and all that. If you just, all it is the skill of becoming present in the moment. And it's a skill like any other skill in that you get better at it the more you do it, the more you force yourself to do it. That's all meditation is forcing your attention back to your breath and the moment. And your attention really wants to wander. And so if you just, it's like lifting weights almost. If your attention wanders, you bring it back. Your attention wanders, you bring it back. It's like, it's like pumping iron or whatever else. So you get better at doing that. And so, but especially for beginner, I did try meditation a couple of times, but it's surprisingly intensely difficult
Yes.
to sit and not do anything.
That's the first lesson of meditation, is that you're not really in control of your mind, because you really want to focus on your breath, and you really can't.
You really can't. Your mind has ways of tricking you out of it. So especially at the beginning, it's very much a struggle. It's not a peaceful, it might look peaceful from the outside, but it's very difficult. And I think I linked in, I don't know if it was the outside piece or one of the blog follow-ups I did, but this piece where they had people sit alone with there was an experiment where they had people sit alone with their thoughts, and people would literally rather shock themselves just to have something to do other than sit with their thoughts.
I tweeted that when I saw it. I remember.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Ago, So I found that yoga, and just to clarify, I don't know if anybody will care about this, but the kind of yoga I did was hot yoga, which is a very specific kind of, it's an hour and a half long. It's 105 degrees in the room. It's like,
it's literally hot?
It's a very, very hot room. Yeah, they jack the temperature up,
that sounds
and they
better.
jack the humidity up. There's a very specific temperature and humidity, so you're sweating insanely. And it's a prescribed series of poses that's the same every time, which is not true in all yoga. This is like a very set number of poses. And in addition to being, whatever benefits yoga has in terms of like helping you return your attention to your breath and the mind part, it's a very, very intense physical workout, both for your muscles and for cardiovascular. So to me, that was the great combo. Like, I wanted to get a workout, I wanted to get exercise, I wanted to get in better shape, but I also wanted something that was meditative, if not meditation. And to me, hot yoga just turned out to be the perfect balance. So, the way it's meditative is you're constantly, and the thing that's cool about yoga relative to other kind of exercise regimes, like if you look at CrossFit, you're always doing and pushing yourself. Mm-hmm. But yoga, when you're trying to stretch a certain way, it's not that you're pushing so much as trying to stop resisting. You know what I mean? It's a slightly different thing. You're trying to let go. Mm-hmm. Your muscles want to hold you back, and you have to let them loosen to let you into these poses. So you have to constantly be bringing your mind and focus back to your breath and back to your internal states. If you get distracted, you just do worse. So it's meditative. It's not meditation, but I found it meditative, and I found other things. there's a lot of things you can do that let you have that exercise with your mind that aren't meditation. I think there's a variety of ways to get that same sort of benefit.
And is the instruction explicit in yoga that you are supposed to bring your mind back to your breath and stuff, or was that just something you did?
Oh, no, it's a very big part of it. Between every stretch or pose, you get this 20 seconds or so where you're just laying on your back, and it's supposed to be, that's when you're trying to let your worries go and let your mind go, because that's when you're getting the benefit. All this new fresh blood is circulating and everything. So yeah, it's a very big part of it. And I focused on that part particularly because I found like meditation was just so hard for me, and yoga kind of tricked me into doing it. It gave me kind of a backdoor way to get into it.
Okay. Now, it wasn't unrelenting bliss, right? I mean, there must have been ups and downs. I mean, were there sustained periods when you thought, this is crazy, this isn't fun?
Oh, sure. I mean, life is life, and you're you, whether you're working or not. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people, I think, wanted to hear some kind of eat, pray, love type of, how I'd had some sort of spiritual whatever, but I'm still myself, and a year is not enough to change 40 years worth of momentum in being myself. So yeah, I mean, I still worried that I should be doing other things. I still worried. To me, one of the central struggles was, should I be using this time off to do things and accomplish things and try new things? Because it's such this extraordinary opportunity that most people don't get. Am I wasting it if I'm not, getting the eat, pray, love adventures out of it? Or is the year primarily for just chilling the hell out and relaxing? And it took me a long time of struggling back and forth before I made peace with just relaxing. It was very hard for me. We're not it's not something you're really allowed in America to just embrace doing nothing and being lazy for being lazy's sake and just chilling out for your mental health's sake. You're supposed to be doing something or accomplishing something. And it took me a long time to let that go.
Yeah, you tried to work on a novel for a while, right?
Yeah, I did. I pounded my head away on a novel for a while. And, like I said in the piece, after a while, I found myself, late at night, standing at the computer, stressed out, procrastinating, feeling bad about procrastinating, working a little bit, and then, not getting enough sleep, and just all this. And it occurred to me, like, this is exactly how I felt before I took my break. Like, I'm back in the same anxious feeling like I'm not getting enough done, staying up late so I can get enough done, that same cycle. And so that was sort of when I made the decision, like, I don't have to do this. No one's making me do this. I'm just going to let it go. And it was good, I think, that I did that. I might return to it maybe when I'm old and retired or something.
Now, you presumably saw more of your family.
Yes, I did. And it was delightful. One of the coolest things was, I think any parent, especially parents in dual income homes where both parents are working, know exactly what I mean when I say it feels like 90% of your time with your kids when you're in that situation is this kind of martial, goal-focused, you're getting them up, you're getting ready for school, you're getting them out the door, and then they come home and you're working to get dinner done, and you're working to get them toothbrushed and in bed, and it just feels like almost all your time is rushed doing stuff with them because neither parent gets home, till 6, and then the time is gone. So, and we had them in, after school care because we couldn't get to pick them up right after school. So they hung out in after school care until about 6. So we took them out of after school care and they came straight home on the bus after school around 3:30. And I found that those hours between like 3:30 and 6, between the time they got home and the time we needed to eat dinner, were just this kind of lost, drifty, imaginative time where you're not really supposed to be doing anything, and there's not, it's just time to hang out together and just kind of loll around together and have long, winding conversations or throw catch in the backyard or whatever. Just this time to spend with them that wasn't this kind of timed, goal-directed, focused, kind of getting things done time. And that was great. I loved it. It was so, and my kids are at such a great age right now, too. It was a great time to do this with them. And that was probably my favorite part of the whole experience.
And one of them entered Little League during this phase.
Right. Huck, yeah. Huck, right before I went on my break, decided that he wanted to be good at baseball. And then we started practicing in the backyard, and we threw for hours and hours in the backyard, and he tested up into Little League a year early.
How old is he?
He was 8 at the time.
Uh-huh.
And then they found out he's pretty good, and he pitched in a few games, and it was just like in the space of the year that I was off, he just transformed from this sort of hesitant, awkward kid to a really good baseball playing kid with all the mannerisms and the hat and all the right gear, and it was just like
chewing tobacco.
Yeah, well, he practiced spitting quite a bit, so he could get like a casual looking spit down. And I was just thinking, like, how much of that would I have kind of missed if I'd been working all the time? Like, I got to really see it and experience it, sort of week by week, and it was an interesting way of like marking time, and it was just got me thinking about how fast that stuff goes by and how much of it we miss when we're busy all the time.
Which leads us to the culminating scene in your piece, which would you care to describe now?
Sure. It was late in my break, and this was after Huck had become a kind of a Little League star, and we were back in the backyard, kind of throwing ball again. It was very Field of Dreams. Like, we had this nice late afternoon light coming in, and we're throwing the ball, and it was thumping in our gloves, and I just had this moment. It's kind of hard to describe, where I felt really like tragic and sad for a minute. Like, these moments fly by so fast. Like, Huck is not going to be. He just seemed so perfect right then. Like, he was. He's full of potential, and he was good at baseball, and he was proud of himself, and it was just like so nice to see. But I knew, like, he's not going to be that way for long. I'm going to blink, and he's going to be whatever, a teenager, and then I'll blink again, and he's going to be out of the house. And it's just like these things go by so fast. But then, that's when I sort of realized and appreciated, well, at least I'm here to see this. At least I'm present. At least I don't have my phone in my hand. Mm-hmm. Sort of half playing with him. At least I'm not rushing through this because we have to get dinner ready or whatever. At least I'm able to be here with him, present in this moment. And like, how many moments like that do you even get?
Right. And so you got kind of sad and then recovered.
That would be a way of summarizing it. Yes.
It's funny because in kind of Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist version of mindfulness, the idea is very much to be present for these fleeting moments, but to, in a sense, not lament their fleetingness, because a part of Buddhism is the acceptance of the transience of everything, and once you accept it, then it will no longer lead to the suffering that the transience otherwise leads to.
Right.
And, there's something to be said for that for sure. But I personally like the idea of hanging on to just a touch of the melancholy. I mean, it does seem to me that is a little of that. I've indulged in way too much of it over my life, but a little of that is part of, in a way, part of being mindful, you could argue.
Yeah, it's part of experiencing the moment. And I honestly feel like a lot of our anxiety, a lot of our modern anxieties, especially as parents, are that we get so few of those moments where we're fully present and there's not things tugging us 10 different ways, that we get really anxious about hanging on to them. You know, we plan and plan and plan, and then retrospect and retrospect and retrospect, and we take 50 million pictures with our phones. We just, you know, we're very much constantly looking forward or looking back because, you know, when you're being pulled 10 different ways and you're distracted and you're, you know, half in your phone, it just flows by like water and you never really get those snapshots.
And have you ever
never
noticed
really register it.
How few people other than you ever look at those pictures you took? I mean, you're taking them kind of half planning to show them to
we don't even, it's a paradox of digital photography that now I have exponentially more pictures of every moment of my life than I ever used to, and I never look at any of them because there's too many. Who's got time to wait?
You don't even go back and look at them yourself, and they do lead you to kind of miss the moment. It's like you're only half there for your kid's graduation or whatever. Yeah,
it's one of many ways, and this is the thing about social media. This was an interesting experience internally too. Is for a long time I was very active on Twitter, extremely active on Twitter.
Yeah.
And for a long time I had been, you know, using Twitter not only to spread my work and to talk about climate change and everything else, but to talk about cute stuff my kids said, or like take pictures of cool places where I was, and life casting, whatever they call it. You know, I had been and I had trained myself to think of, you know, sort of subconsciously trained myself to think of every moment of my life as kind of a potential snapshot to share.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a long time before I stopped thinking that way. Before, you know, there were times when I went on a lot of long walks, and I'd go on a walk and come around and see some beautiful tableau in Seattle. And I would think like, boom, Instagram, you know, and then I would remember, oh, I'm not on Instagram. I'm not talking online anymore. And then just fleetingly, I would think, well, what the hell good is this beautiful tableau if it's just me seeing it and there's nobody else appreciating it? How do I even know it's real? You know, you start thinking of you start seeing your own life reflected in this social network and this social feedback. And if that's gone, then you're, you know, and I think we all start thinking that way now, that every opportunity we're constantly building this identity online and this persona online, and we get so caught up in building it up and how different things we do can bolster that persona that we just forget, really, like you were saying, to experience things just in and of themselves.
Well, there is this incentive to not waste a single, you know, the most casual insight, right? I mean, you look at some highly successful people, and they're people who, like, everything is either a blog-sized thought or a Twitter-sized thought or an Instagram moment, but don't waste anything, because you got to get yourself out there. So it's tempting, but it has. And
for the whole year, I had tweeted so much that I would have. You know, it's almost like a musician that gets so used to their instrument that it becomes, you know, it's kind of semi-conscious. But I would still have these 140 character tweets just boom, pop into my mind, and I just know that they fit perfectly. You know, I didn't have to count the characters. I literally started thinking in these Twitter-sized insights that are bounce around like popcorn.
Yeah.
It took a while to let that go too. Of course, now I'm back in it.
Well, that's the question. How much of this has endured? Are you a changed person now that you're back fully on the grid?
Well, I don't know about changed person. I feel much more. I feel much less anxious. I think I'm sort of, and part of it is I've kind of worked out a return to work that gives me a saner schedule. Because what I was doing is I was spending all day online because they were work hours, you know, and you're supposed to be, in my job, you're supposed to be there, visible online, available to your colleagues and everything else for work hours. But it was so much buzz and so much input and emails and tweets and, you know, research. And I never got anything, never got any writing done during the day. So I'd do all my writing in the second shift at night that started at like 10 p.m. And so it was like working two jobs, you know, it was ridiculous. It was like working 12 hours a day. So I've worked out now where I'm more flexible during the day. I'm mostly working from home. I'm more flexible during the day, so I can go do yoga or go take a walk, can be in and out, do most of my work at night. But I've just sort of constructed a saner schedule that gives me time to, I still try every day either to do yoga or to take a 4 or 5 mile walk. That's sort of like, I'm hanging on to that, clinging to it. But like the pull of Twitter and all of it is still just as much there for me as it ever was.
But the frame of mind to some extent endures. I mean, the appreciation of the moment and so on, and blah blah blah, as the sign says.
Yes, the blah 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 does. It has lingered, and I feel like I'm not as anxious, and I'm not as tied to things. But of course, the whole question is how long that lasts and how much of it you can keep with you. And, there's all these techniques that are available to help you do that during the day. But this is what led me to mindfulness, is that when I went on my break, I started reading about all these, there's all these life hacking blogs and all these tons and tons of advice out there for how to be more productive and how to prioritize better and sync this better with that, and all these sort of ways to deal with modern kind of digital overload. And I would read about them. I'm sure I'm not alone in this experience. I spent a lot of time reading about them and implemented almost none of them. Right. Because it's like, it takes to implement any of them, you have to be able to have this willpower and this self-discipline and this focus. So it's just kind of moving the problem backward a ways, like, well, if I had the self-discipline and focus and mindfulness to do this shit, I wouldn't need it in the first place.
True of a lot of productivity advice, I for sure.
It's like
if I could follow this advice, I wouldn't need it.
Yeah. It's like step one, assume mindfulness, and then like proceed from there.
Yeah.
So this is what sort of like, whether it's the kind of new agey people or the kind of hyper technocratic life hacking, all of it in the end, it comes back to mindfulness. You have to have this skill of managing your attention instead of letting it just kind of blur and be pulled in a million different ways. It all comes back to that.
There's a technical term for this scattered attention. What is it? Chronic scattered, continuous partial attention is a technical term for the state of mind that a lot of us have much of the day now, and is the opposite of mindfulness, kind of.
Yeah, and this, I have always wanted to emphasize, and I have again and again as I've talked with people at this piece, and I try to avoid in the piece saying that the kind of mental activity and the kind of things you do online are bad or corrosive or false or inauthentic. Like, I don't think any of that. I don't think the internet is bad, but there's a particular way of being on the internet where you're kind of bouncing over the surface of things. You can take in an incredibly broad amount of information and tie, it's dazzling and intoxicating, and I love it. It's sort of like cruising around these worlds of information and finding ways that things tie to each other. But that's a particular kind of mental activity, and your mind is just like your body. It needs a varied diet. You need to do, there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to do other kinds of mental activity too, like calm contemplation, like daydreaming, like interacting with other human beings in the real physical world, like all these things. You need a variety of these things for your mental health. And if you just do this one kind of thing all the time, it's just like any other sort of monocrop or any other obsession in your life. It gets unhealthy after a while.
Mm-hmm. Now you have kind of an edge, I would say. I mean, you feel strongly about your issues, largely environmental issues. You do not hesitate to express disdain for people who you think are wrong about the issues. And, one might worry that an experience like this would rob you of your edge. But, I checked, right before we got on. I looked at your blog, and you call some people in Congress dimwits, and I looked at your tweets, and you referred to somebody as the most sociopathic person you'd ever met or something. I thought, okay, good. All is right with the world. What is your take? I mean, would you say it has not fundamentally altered that aspect of your identity?
Sure. No, I think it's perfectly, I think if anything, in the world of, especially in my world, in the world of kind of climate change politics, there's too much boringness around, and there's a need for the occasional kick in the butt, even if it's just provocative, even if it's just trying to get a reaction out of people. We need more of that in my space because it tends to be kind of mind-numbing. But so I haven't become like a Buddhist. I'm not enlightened. But what I try not to do anymore, you pick your targets and you punch up, and I try not anymore to get caught up in these kind of petty things on Twitter where you're just sort of sniping back and forth, or sniping back and forth with people on email, or just you're really upset and anxious about some negative feedback you got somewhere online, some blog comment or something. Like I'm much better at letting that stuff go and kind of choosing where to put my energies. Mm-hmm. But there's always going to be a need for people to mock Republicans in Congress. I wouldn't ever want anybody to get so enlightened that they move beyond that.
Okay. Well, I will let you get back to that and to the blah, blah, blah in general. But thanks a lot for taking the time. Everybody should read the piece. Everybody should read your blog at Grist, and and follow you on Twitter at, what is it, Dr.
Grist.
Dr. Grist.
Frequently misread as Dr. Grist to the point that I've now given
that
up.
Was my interpretation, but it's just your initials.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fine though. But thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for the time.
My pleasure. See you next time.
All right, see ya.